The warning sirens had stopped 3 hours ago. That was when the last defense station orbiting Earth went silent, torn apart by Krethak plasma fire. Captain Elena Vostok stood on the bridge of the TDS Indomitable and watched her homeworld burn through the viewport. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were now just glowing craters. The planet that had given birth to humanity was dying. "Captain, we're receiving the final evacuation shuttle," her first officer reported. Commander Chun's voice was steady, but his hands shook as they moved across the control panel. "That's the last one. No more signals from the surface." Elena nodded slowly. 20,000 refugees packed into a ship designed for a crew of 800. The hallways were full of families huddled together, children crying, old people staring at nothing. They had lost everything. She had failed to protect them. "Take us out of orbit," she ordered. Full burn toward the outer systems. The Indomitable shuddered as her engines came to life. The old heavy cruiser had seen better days. Her hull was scarred from 3 years of constant warfare. Half her weapon systems were offline. Her shields barely functioned. But she was still flying, and that made her special. She was the last warship of the Terran Defense Fleet. Every other ship had been destroyed. The Krethak had come without warning 3 years ago. Their ships had poured through the border systems like a flood, overwhelming human defenses through sheer numbers. They were methodical, efficient, and merciless. Every human colony they captured was stripped of resources, and the survivors were either killed or taken as slaves. Humanity had tried to fight back, but the aliens had better weapons, more ships, and no fear of death. Now, Earth itself had fallen, and the Indomitable was running for her life. "Ma'am, I'm picking up scattered distress signals," the communications officer called out. Labchun Monorazirades of Laivjung, but she had survived every battle the ship had fought. Multiple frequencies from the outer colonies. Praxis 7, New Sarajevo, Kepler's Hope, at least 10 others. "Are they under attack?" Elena asked. "No, ma'am. These are old signals, some of them weeks old. The Krethak left garrison fleets at each colony to hunt down survivors. These are people in hiding, asking for rescue." Elena walked to the tactical display. Red markers showed Krethak positions throughout human space. Each marker represented a garrison fleet, usually 1 or 2 cruisers with support ships. The aliens had conquered everything, and now they were taking their time cleaning up the remnants of humanity. "How many people are we talking about?" she asked. Park checked her screens. "Hard to say. Could be thousands at each location. Maybe more." Commander Chun moved to stand beside Elena. He spoke quietly so only she could hear. "Captain, we can't save them. We barely have enough supplies for the people already on board. And if we go back into occupied space, the Krethak will hunt us down." "I know," Elena said. She stared at the tactical display for a long moment. The smart move was obvious. Run. Find some empty system far from Krethak space. Hide the refugees and hope the aliens never found them. It was what any good captain would do. But Elena kept thinking about those distress signals. Thousands of people trapped on occupied worlds, hiding in caves and ruined cities, waiting for rescue that would never come. They would die slowly, picked off by alien patrols or starving when their supplies ran out. "Get me the senior staff," she said suddenly, "and the civilian leaders. Conference room in 1 hour." Chun looked surprised. "What are you planning?" Elena turned away from the display. "Something stupid." An hour later, 15 people crowded into the ship's conference room. The senior officers sat on one side of the table, the civilian leaders on the other. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo represented the medical staff. Engineer Marcus Webb spoke for the refugees who had technical skills. Professor James Hartley was the eldest civilian on board, A historian who had taught at Oxford before the war. Elena stood at the head of the table. She activated the display screen, showing the tactical map with all the Krethak garrison positions. "We have a choice to make," she began. "We can run and hide, hope the Krethak never find us. Or we can fight back." "Fight back?" Webb said incredulously. "Captain, we have one damaged ship. They have an empire." "They have an overconfident empire," Elena corrected. "Look at these garrison positions. They're spread thin. Each stronghold has a small fleet because they think we're beaten. They think we'll just roll over and die." "They're right," Chun said quietly. "We are beaten, Elena. Earth is gone. The fleet is destroyed. What can one ship do?" Elena leaned forward, her hands on the table. "One ship can be a symbol. We hit these garrisons one by one. We free the survivors. We show every human still alive that we're not done fighting. We prove to the Krethak that humanity doesn't surrender." The room was silent. Then Professor Hartley spoke, his old voice surprisingly strong. "Throughout history, the greatest moments of human courage came when we had nothing left to lose. When we were pushed to the edge and decided that if we were going to die anyway, we might as well die standing up." He looked around the table. "I vote we fight. You'll get us all killed," Webb protested. "We're already dead if we run," Dr. Okonkwo said. "At least this way we die for something." One by one, the others voiced their support. Even Chun finally nodded, though he looked sick doing it. "Then it's decided," Elena said. "The Indomitable stops running. We're going to hit every Krethak stronghold we can find. We're going to save everyone we can save. And we're going to show these aliens that humanity's last starship is more than just a target." She pulled up data on their first objective. Praxis 7, 1 Krethak cruiser, 3 support ships, estimated 3,000 human prisoners in the mining complex. "We'll need a plan." Commander Chun moved to her side, already thinking tactically despite his doubts. "We're outgunned. We'll need to be smart." "Then we'll be smarter than them," Elena said. "We'll use every trick, every advantage we can find. Because we're not just fighting for these 20,000 people on board. We're fighting for everyone who still believes humanity deserves to survive." The meeting continued late into the night as they planned their first strike. Outside the conference room, word spread through the crowded ship. The refugees who had lost everything began to feel something they hadn't felt in years. Hope. The Indomitable drifted into the Praxis system, broadcasting distress signals on every frequency. Her engines flickered and died. Emergency lights blinked across her damaged hull. To any observer, she looked like a refugee ship on her last legs, desperately seeking sanctuary. The Krethak garrison fleet noticed her immediately. Their cruiser, the Burning Talon, broke orbit from Praxis 7 and moved to intercept. 2 smaller support ships followed behind, weapons charging. The aliens had seen this before. Desperate humans fleeing into their territory, hoping for mercy. It made for easy hunting. On the Indomitable's bridge, Captain Vostok watched the enemy ships approach. Her crew sat perfectly still at their stations, waiting. In the cargo bay, Engineer Webb stood beside 300 cubic meters of mining explosives they had fabricated from materials on board. His hand rested on the detonator. "They're hailing us," Lieutenant Park reported, "demanding our surrender." "How close are they?" Elena asked. Commander Chun checked his tactical display. 2,000 meters in closing. "They're taking their time, probably enjoying this." "Let them get closer," Elena said calmly. "We need them within 1,000 meters." Down on Praxis 7, 3,000 human prisoners huddled in the mining complex that had become their prison. Most of them were weak from malnutrition and hard labor. The Krethak guards had grown lazy over the months. Confident that their broken prisoners posed no threat, They didn't know that hidden in the complex was Thomas Rivera, a former demolitions expert who had been slowly sabotaging the power systems. He crouched in a maintenance tunnel with 5 other prisoners, all of them holding makeshift weapons. They had received Elena's encrypted message 3 hours ago. When the shooting started above, they would seize control of the garrison's power grid. Rivera checked his improvised timer. Any minute now, above the planet, the burning Talon moved within 1,500 meters of the Indomitable. The Krethak captain was in no hurry. The human ship was clearly disabled, going nowhere. He ordered his weapons officer to target the engines, planning to board the vessel and take the refugees as slaves. 1,000 meters, Chun announced. Now, Elena ordered. The Indomitable's engines suddenly roared to life at full power. Her momentum carried her directly toward the burning Talon as Webb triggered the explosives in the cargo bay. The blast tore open the Indomitable's side, but the force of the explosion was directed outward like a massive shotgun. Debris, shrapnel, and raw kinetic energy slammed into the Krethak cruiser at point-blank range. The burning Talon's shields flared and collapsed. Her hull cracked open. Atmosphere vented into space. The alien crew never had time to react. "All weapons, fire!" Elena shouted. The Indomitable's remaining guns opened up, raking the support ships with everything she had. One alien vessel exploded immediately. The second tried to flee, but missiles from the Indomitable caught it before it could jump to faster-than-light speed. Down on the surface, Rivera heard the explosions in orbit. "That's our signal. Move!" The small group of prisoners rushed through the tunnels toward the garrison's central power station. The Krethak guards were distracted, looking up at the sky where their ships were burning. Rivera's group hit them from behind with pipes, rocks, and tools turned into weapons. It was brutal and desperate, but the guards went down. Rivera reached the power controls and entered the code Elena had sent him. The garrison's defense grid shut down. The force fields holding the other prisoners flickered and died. Throughout the mining complex, 3,000 humans realized they were suddenly free. The revolution spread like wildfire. Prisoners overwhelmed their guards through sheer numbers. Workers who had been barely surviving found strength they didn't know they had. Within an hour, the garrison had fallen, and the Krethak forces on Praxis 7 were destroyed or fleeing into the wilderness. The Indomitable landed at the mining complex 12 hours later. Elena walked down the ramp to find thousands of people waiting. They were thin, dirty, and exhausted, but they were alive. And they were cheering. Rivera pushed through the crowd and saluted. "Captain Vostok, the facility is secure. We have supplies, fuel, and some weapons we took from the Krethak." Elena looked at the faces around her. Hope. She saw hope in their eyes. "Get everyone aboard who wants to come," she ordered. "And prepare those supplies for transfer. We have more stops to make." Over the next 2 months, the Indomitable struck at 4 more garrison positions. Each battle was different. At New Sarajevo, a resistance group led by former soldiers used guerrilla tactics to support her assault on an orbital platform. The Indomitable provided fire support while the fighters sabotaged the station from within. They freed 800 people. At Kepler's Hope, 3 civilian freighters volunteered to rig themselves with explosives and ram the Krethak blockade. The captains and their skeleton crews gave their lives to punch a hole in the enemy formation. The Indomitable flew through the gap and evacuated 2,000 colonists before the aliens could regroup. At Meridian Station, there was no battle at all. The Krethak garrison surrendered when they saw the Indomitable approaching. They had heard the stories. They knew what had happened to the other garrisons. The alien commander chose to flee rather than face the ship that was becoming a legend. Word spread through the underground networks that connected the scattered remnants of humanity. The Indomitable was fighting back. Captain Vostok was winning. Suddenly, People who had given up started planning resistance. Groups that had been hiding started attacking their occupiers. The spark of rebellion was growing into a flame, but the Krethak High Command was taking notice too. In the central fortress of their empire, Fleet Marshal Krathzer studied reports of the human ship with growing anger. This was not acceptable. Conquered species did not fight back. They submitted or they died quietly. Yet these humans had destroyed 5 garrisons and freed tens of thousands of prisoners. "Send Battle Group Crimson," he ordered. "I want that ship destroyed and its crew executed publicly. Make an example of them." The Battle Group Crimson consisted of 12 warships, each more powerful than the Indomitable. They jumped into the Arcturus system where intelligence suggested the human ship was hiding. But the Indomitable was gone, already moving to her next target. The battle group searched for 3 weeks, always one step behind. They arrived at Praxis 7 to find the garrison destroyed. They reached New Sarajevo to find the station abandoned. The humans were like ghosts, striking and vanishing before the Krethak could respond. On board the Indomitable, Elena sat in her ready room and studied intelligence data they had gathered from captured Krethak systems. Chan entered and found her staring at a star chart. "We've rescued over 15,000 people," he reported. "The ship is beyond overcrowded. We need to find a place to establish a permanent base." "I know," Elena said. "But first, look at this." She pointed to 3 markers on the chart, deep in the Karina sector. "These are fortress stations. The Krethak use them as regional command centers. Each one coordinates fleet movements across dozens of systems." Chum studied the markers and felt his blood run cold. "Elena, those fortresses have hundreds of ships defending them. We can't win this war by picking off small garrisons forever," Elena interrupted. "Eventually, the Krethak will catch us. But if we could destroy these fortresses, we could cripple their ability to control this entire region. We could buy humanity real time to rebuild." "It's suicide," Chun said flatly. "Probably," Elena agreed. "But we're not alone anymore." She pulled up communication logs. Messages from resistance groups across human space. Offers of support from merchant captains willing to retrofit their ships for combat. Even some alien species that the Krethak had conquered were reaching out, asking if the humans might share their tactics. "We're building a fleet," Elena said. "It won't be much. Civilian ships, mining vessels, whatever we can find. But if we can coordinate an attack on all 3 fortresses simultaneously, we might actually pull this off." Chum sat down heavily. "You're really going to do this?" "We came this far," Elena said. "We proved humans won't give up. Now we need to prove we can really hurt them." She stood and looked out the viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, thousands of humans were watching and waiting to see what the Indomitable would do next. She had become their beacon of hope. Now she had to lead them into the most desperate battle humanity had ever fought. The Kar Nebula was a massive cloud of gas and dust that interfered with sensors and communications. It was the perfect hiding place for a fleet that had no business existing. 217 ships gathered in the nebula's depths, and most of them were never meant for war. There were merchant freighters with jury-rigged weapons welded to their hulls. Mining vessels that had been converted into mobile artillery platforms. Passenger liners whose cargo holds now contained missile launchers instead of luggage. Even small family transports had volunteered, their civilian owners determined to fight despite having no military training. Captain Vostok stood in the Indomitable's observation deck and watched the ragtag fleet assemble. Her ship was the only real warship among them, and she was held together by emergency repairs and stubborn determination. The rest were civilians playing soldier, farmers and engineers and merchants who had lost their homes and wanted revenge. Commander Chun joined her at the viewport. "The last groups are arriving now." "That's everyone who answered the call," How many people total? Elena asked. Approximately 43,000, Chun said quietly. Most of them have never been in combat. A lot of them will die in the first minutes of the attack. Elena knew he was right. She had gone over the battle plans 100 times, looking for a way to reduce casualties. There wasn't one. The 3 Krethak fortress stations were too heavily defended. The only way to destroy them was to overwhelm the defenses through sheer numbers and sacrifice. It was a terrible plan, but it was the only plan they had. Have all the ship captains meet me in 1 hour, she ordered. I need to address them before we begin. An hour later, Elena stood in a virtual conference space. Around her, holographic projections showed the faces of 200 ship captains. Some looked confident. Many looked terrified. All of them looked determined. I won't lie to you, Elena began. What we're about to attempt is probably impossible. The Krethak fortresses are defended by hundreds of warships. They have automated defense grids that can track and destroy multiple targets simultaneously. Their shields can withstand nuclear strikes. By every military calculation, we should lose this battle before it even starts. She paused and looked at their faces. But the Krethak made one mistake. They assumed that because they beat us before, we would stay beaten. They thought that if they took our worlds and killed our people, we would just curl up and die. They didn't understand that humans don't work that way. Elena activated the tactical display, showing the 3 fortress stations in the Carina sector. Our fleet will divide into 3 strike groups. Each group will target 1 fortress. The nebula will mask our approach until we're practically on top of them. Then we hit them with everything we have. She highlighted specific ships on the display. These vessels have been loaded with antimatter warheads. Once we break through the outer defenses, they will ram the fortress reactors. The explosions should destroy the stations completely. One of the captains, a woman named Sarah Chun, who commanded a converted ore hauler, spoke up. Captain Vostok, the ramming ships won't survive. Those are suicide missions. I know, Elena said simply. The crews are all volunteers. They understand what they're signing up for. Another captain raised his hand. What happens if we fail? What if the fortresses destroy us before we can get through? Then we fail, Elena said bluntly. And the Krethak continue their genocide of humanity. But if we succeed, we cripple their ability to project power across 3 sectors. We buy the scattered human colonies time to rebuild. We prove to every other species the Krethak have conquered that resistance is possible. We show the galaxy that humanity will not go quietly into extinction. She deactivated the tactical display and looked directly at them. I'm not ordering anyone to do this. Every person here volunteered. If you want to leave, if you want to take your ship and run for the edge of space, I won't stop you. This is a choice you have to make for yourselves. The conference space was silent for a long moment. Then Sarah Chun spoke again. Captain, my family died on New Beijing. My children were 6 and 9 years old. The Krethak killed them because they were inefficient resources. I didn't come here to run away. I came here to make those alien bastards pay. My husband flew defensive fighters during the siege of Earth, another captain said. He bought me time to escape with our daughter. I owe it to him to finish what he started. One by one, the captains voiced their commitment. Farm workers who had become soldiers. Teachers who had learned to fire weapons. Grandparents who wanted their grandchildren to grow up free. They all had their reasons for fighting, and none of them wanted to back down. Then we go forward, Elena said. May whatever gods are listening watch over us all. The fleet moved out of the nebula in 3 groups. Strike Group Alpha, led by the Indomitable, headed for Fortress Primus. Strike Group Beta targeted Fortress Secundus. Strike Group Gamma aimed for Fortress Tertius. Each group consisted of roughly 70 ships. and each knew they were probably flying to their deaths. The nebula's interference hid them until they were almost at weapons range. Then the Krethak sensors detected the approaching fleet, and all hell broke loose. Fortress Primus was a massive construct, 30 kilometers across, bristling with weapons and surrounded by a defensive fleet of over 100 warships. When Strike Group Alpha emerged from the nebula, the Krethak response was immediate and devastating. Plasma fire tore through the human formation. A converted freighter exploded in the first salvo, taking 60 crew with it. A mining ship's shields collapsed under concentrated fire, and the vessel broke apart. Within the first 3 minutes, Strike Group Alpha had lost 12 ships. All vessels, evasive maneuvers. Elena ordered, "Don't give them easy targets. Spread out and keep moving." The Indomitable charged forward, her weapons blazing. She was a proper warship, and her guns could actually hurt the enemy. She targeted a Krethak destroyer and poured fire into its shields until they collapsed. The follow-up shots ripped through the alien ship's hull dot around her. The civilian vessels did their best. They weren't trained for fleet combat, but they were brave. A passenger liner rammed a Krethak cruiser at full speed, both ships exploding in a ball of fire. A mining vessel used its drilling lasers to cut through an enemy destroyer's armor. A family transport loaded with missiles fired everything it had before an alien plasma bolt vaporized it. The battle was chaos. Ships burned and died on both sides. The space around Fortress Primus became a graveyard of twisted metal and frozen bodies. But slowly, desperately, Strike Group Alpha pushed forward. On the Indomitable's bridge, Commander Chun called out enemy positions while Lieutenant Park coordinated with the other ships. Engineer Webb rerouted power from life support to weapons, knowing that if they couldn't break through, needing life support wouldn't matter. "The ramming ships are ready," Park reported. "They're waiting for your signal." Elena watched the tactical display. They were close now, but the fortress's defenses were still operational. Automated gun turrets tracked and destroyed incoming missiles. Shield generators protected the critical reactor sections. They needed an opening. "All ships, concentrate fire on the fortress's northern defense grid," Elena ordered. "I don't care if you're throwing rocks at them. Just keep shooting." Every surviving ship in Strike Group Alpha turned their weapons toward the northern section of the fortress. The combined firepower was enormous. Merchant freighters fired mining charges. Civilian vessels launched their entire missile payloads. The Indomitable added her heavy guns to the assault. The fortress's shields flickered under the sustained bombardment. One generator overloaded, then another. A section of the defense grid went offline. "Now," Elena shouted. "Ramming ships, execute." 3 converted cargo vessels broke from the formation and accelerated toward the fortress at maximum burn. Their holds were packed with antimatter warheads, enough destructive power to crack a moon. The Krethak defenders tried to stop them, but there was too much chaos, too many targets. 2 of the ramming ships made it through. They struck the fortress's reactor complex at near relativistic speed. The antimatter warheads detonated. The explosion was so bright that every ship in the area had to dim their viewports or be blinded. Fortress Primus cracked open like an egg, its internal fusion reactors adding their energy to the blast. Secondary explosions rippled through the structure. Within seconds, the massive station was tearing itself apart. On board the Indomitable, the crew watched in stunned silence as the fortress died. They had actually done it. The impossible mission had succeeded, but the victory came at a terrible cost. Of the 70 ships in Strike Group Alpha, only 28 remained. Thousands were dead. The Indomitable herself was a wreck, trailing atmosphere and debris. "Status from the other strike groups?" Elena asked quietly. Park checked her communications. "Strike Group Beta reports Fortress Secundus destroyed. Strike Group Gamma reports Fortress Tertius destroyed. Both groups suffered heavy casualties. Elena closed her eyes. They had won. All three fortresses were gone. But the price had been almost everything they had. "Get me a count of surviving vessels and personnel," she ordered. "And send out search and rescue teams for any escape pods. I want every survivor we can find." The explosions from the three fortress stations could be seen across dozens of light years. Across the Carina sector, human survivors looked up at the night sky and saw new stars blazing where the Krethak strongholds had been. They didn't know the details yet, didn't know the names of those who had died, but they knew that someone had struck back, and struck hard. On board the Indomitable, Captain Elena Vostok sat in her command chair and watched the damage reports scroll across her screens. The numbers were devastating. Of the 217 ships that had attacked, only 32 survived. Over 38,000 people dead in a single day. The largest naval battle in human history, and they had paid for it in blood. But they had won. 3 fortress stations destroyed. The Krethak's ability to coordinate fleet movements in the region shattered. The alien empire's expansion into human space had ground to a complete halt. Commander Chun approached her chair. He looked exhausted, his uniform stained with soot and blood from helping with damage control. "Captain, we have a problem." "Another one?" Elena asked tiredly. "It's you," Chun said quietly. "The medical team ran a scan after you were exposed to that radiation leak in engineering. You have advanced radiation poisoning. Dr. Okonkwo says you have maybe 3 days, 4 at most." Elena had suspected as much. She had felt it the moment she manually sealed the reactor breach to save the engine room crew. The burning in her lungs, the weakness in her limbs. She had traded her life for theirs without hesitation. "Don't tell anyone yet," she ordered. "We need to maintain morale while we regroup." "Elena, that's an order, Commander." Over the next 2 days, the surviving ships limped toward a rendezvous point in an uncharted system. They picked up escape pods along the way, rescuing what survivors they could. The final count was grim, but not hopeless. 32 ships, 9,000 survivors, and enough supplies to last a few months if they were careful. More importantly, they had accomplished their mission. Long-range sensors showed Krethak fleet movements in complete disarray. Without the fortress stations to coordinate logistics and communications, the alien forces couldn't maintain their supply lines. Garrison fleets were being pulled back to more secure positions. Occupied worlds were suddenly left with minimal defense, and the word was spreading. The underground networks that connected the scattered remnants of humanity were alive with the news. Earth's children had struck the mightiest blow against the Krethak in 3 years of war. Captain Vostok and the Indomitable had proven that resistance was possible, but Elena wouldn't live to see the full consequences of her victory. On the 3rd day after the battle, she collapsed on the bridge. Dr. Okonkwo rushed her to medical, but there was nothing to be done. The radiation had destroyed too much of her body's cellular structure. She was dying, and everyone knew it. Elena spent her final hours in the medical bay, lying on a bed surrounded by equipment that could do nothing for her. Commander Chun sat beside her, along with Lieutenant Park and Engineer Webb, the senior staff who had become her family during 3 years of war. "How are the repairs coming?" Elena asked. Her voice was weak but still clear. "Slowly," Webb admitted. "The Indomitable took a lot of damage. We can patch her up enough to limp along, but she'll never fight again. Not at her full capacity." "That's okay," Elena said. "She's done enough fighting. Let her rest." Park leaned forward. "Captain, we're receiving messages from all over human space. Colonies we freed, resistance groups we inspired. They're all asking what to do next. They need leadership." Elena looked at Chen. "You'll take command. Not just of the Indomitable, but of all the surviving vessels. You're gonna build a real fleet from what we've started here. I'm not you, Chung protested. I can't inspire people the way you do. You don't need to be me, Elena said. You just need to remember what we proved. Humans don't surrender. We don't give up. Even when everything is against us, we find a way to fight back. She coughed, and Chun saw blood on her lips. The Krethik thought they had won. They thought we were broken. We showed them they were wrong. Over the next hours, Elena received visitors. Sarah Chun, the captain of the converted ore hauler, came to thank her. Thomas Rivera, the demolitions expert from Praxis 7, saluted her one last time. Dozens of others came to say goodbye to the woman who had given them hope when they had none. As the end approached, Elena asked to be moved to the observation deck. They set up her medical bed near the viewport so she could look out at the stars. The surviving ships of her makeshift fleet floated nearby, damaged but still flying. Dr. Okonkwo stood beside her. Is there anything I can do to make you more comfortable? I'm fine, Elena said. I just want to see the stars one more time. Commander Chun entered the observation deck carrying a datapad. Captain, more reports are coming in. The Krethak are withdrawing from 7 occupied systems. Human colonies are starting to rebuild. And we're receiving messages from other species, ones the Krethak conquered years ago. They're asking us how we did it. They want to know if they can resist too. Elena smiled weakly. Tell them yes. Tell them that the Krethak can be beaten. All it takes is courage and the willingness to pay the price. She looked out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, Earth was still burning. The planet that had given birth to humanity was dying, maybe already dead. But humans were still alive. They were scattered, battered, and bleeding, but they were fighting back. The spark that she had lit with the Indomitable's desperate strikes was spreading into a flame that might one day become an inferno. Chun, she said quietly, I need you to promise me something. Anything, Captain. Don't let them forget. Don't let humanity forget what we did here. Not the victory, but the lesson. We were beaten. We had lost everything. But we chose to fight anyway. That's what makes us human. That's what the Krethak will never understand. I promise, Chun said, his voice thick with emotion. Elena's breathing became labored. Dr. Okonkwo checked her monitors and shook her head slightly. It wouldn't be long now. I want to send one last message, Elena said. Broadcast it to every surviving human settlement. To every resistance group. To everyone who still believes humanity deserves to exist. Park set up the communications equipment. Ready when you are, Captain. Elena gathered her strength and spoke into the recorder. Her voice was weak, but her words were strong. This is Captain Elena Vostok of the Terran defense ship Indomitable. If you're hearing this, then I'm gone. But before I go, I want you to know something. We won. We hit the Krethak where it hurt. We proved that humanity cannot be extinguished with bombs and plasma fire. We endured. We fought. We showed them that Earth's children will never surrender. She paused, breathing hard. Now it's your turn. You must show them we cannot be forgotten. Rebuild. Fight back. Find allies among the other species the Krethak have oppressed. Create a future where our children can grow up free. The Krethak won the first war, but the second war is just beginning. And this time, they're going to learn what it really means to fight humanity. She looked out at the stars one final time. We are the children of Earth. We are explorers and dreamers. We are warriors and survivors. And we will never, ever give up. That's what makes us human. That's what makes us strong. Remember that. Honor those who fell. And keep fighting until the last Krethak fortress burns. The recording ended. Elena closed her eyes, a small smile on her face. She had done what she set out to do. She had turned humanity's last starship into something more than just a weapon. She had made it a symbol, a beacon of hope that would light the way for everyone who came after. 3 hours later, Captain Elena Vostok died peacefully, surrounded by the people who had fought beside her. The news spread through the surviving fleet within minutes, and then out into the wider galaxy through 1,000 different channels. The Krethak High Command received the report and tried to spin it as a victory. The human captain was dead, his ship destroyed. But they couldn't hide the truth. 3 fortress stations gone, dozens of garrison fleets in retreat. And across the Empire, other conquered species were starting to whisper about resistance. Commander Chun, now Captain Chun, took command of the Indomitable and the fleet. Following Elena's final orders, he led the surviving ships to a hidden location where they established a base called Sanctuary Station. From there, they began the long work of rebuilding humanity's military strength. The Indomitable never flew into combat again. She was too damaged, too worn out from 3 years of constant warfare. Instead, she was converted into a memorial and a symbol. Her hull was repaired, just enough to make her safe, and she was anchored. Sanctuary Station where everyone could see her. Humans came from across the surviving colonies to stand on her decks and remember. They walked her corridors and looked at the names inscribed on her walls, the names of everyone who had died in the war. They stood on the observation deck where Elena Vostok had spent her final hours, and they looked out at the stars with renewed determination. Years passed. The war continued, but it was different now. Humanity had allies, other species that had been inspired by the Indomitable's stand. They had new ships, built from the ruins of old ones and powered by human determination. They had hope. And whenever a human fleet went into battle, whenever a colony faced down a Krethak assault, they remembered the Indomitable. They remembered Elena Vostok. They remembered that humanity's last starship had become a beacon of hope, proving that even in the darkest hour, the human spirit could burn bright enough to light the way to dawn. The war would last another 10 years. The Krethak Empire would eventually collapse, torn apart by rebellions from a dozen conquered species who had learned from humanity's example. New nations would rise from the ruins. Earth would be reclaimed and rebuilt, though it would never be quite the same. But the lesson of the Indomitable endured. It was taught in schools, remembered in songs, celebrated in ceremonies across human space. The story of how humanity's last starship had refused to surrender, had struck back against impossible odds, and had inspired a galaxy to resist tyranny. Because in the end, that was what made humanity special. Not superior technology or overwhelming force, but the simple refusal to give up. The stubborn, defiant, beautiful determination to keep fighting no matter how bad things got. That was the legacy of the Indomitable. That was the gift Elena Vostok had given her species, hope.